So the first of those speakers, Ash Ramrachia, is the CEO and founder of Academy. Ash has just had a stellar career, both in traditional finance, but also moving towards working within companies and working out how to make sure they're ready for massive transformations. That means growth in the number of employees. And I hope you mentioned the statistic you told me over the phone. But also in terms of the shifting requirements of that workforce in order to deal with new challenges. And so the uptake of AI is most pressing in that world at the moment. So if we could all welcome Ash to the stage. Ash, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to sort of doing a session which might be hopefully interesting and a little bit sort of thought-provoking. And I've called it Rewiring Britain, sort of AI, human potential, and maybe the race to future-proof our workforce. Quick introduction. I run Academy, which is a workforce development company. Before setting Academy up, I was the chief people officer of a high-growth technology company up in the northwest of England called the Hut Group, which kind of went from a startup to a multi-billion-dollar IPO in a few short years. And I also kind of advised both the government and an artificial intelligence hub up in Manchester on sort of impacts of AI in society, and in particular the labour market. And I guess my own individual story is kind of one of potential. I had a sort of, born and brought up in London, pretty typical experience as a sort of kid on a council estate, going to a series of underprivileged schools, being on free school meals, and on the right, that's sort of Fulton Heath bus garage in Croydon, which is where kind of my dad works, and that was a kind of formative experience of seeing actually a load of folks who are kind of underestimated, overlooked, but very luckily for me, I kind of moved to Manchester, went to university, and kind of had a direct experience of what happens when a disruptive technology shift takes place and shifts an entire industry. So I joined this startup called the Hut Group, and it was in online retail. And what was going on at the time, we're going back 2010, so nearly 15 years ago, there was just this big shift in consumer behavior from offline to online. And in the UK, we were at a really, really early phase of that. What it meant for me, I was a recruiter, a talent person. And so my job was to hire in people for the business. And we were starting to grow really, really rapidly. And we needed lots of people who kind of had digital and e-commerce skills. But there was just one big issue. No one had done it before in the UK. So we literally couldn't find people who'd done this before. And it made traditional hiring practically impossible for us. So we couldn't buy in ready-made talent. And so we were kind of forced as an organization, we had no option really but to go to extraordinary lengths to identify people with high potential and develop them quickly into the sort of jobs that we needed to do. And I did a series of initiatives that were entirely focused on how do you identify people who could be successful at this sort of brand new set of jobs. That went well, and with many other factors, it ultimately led to success for our business, global acclaim. Eventually, it was sort of Europe's most valuable technology IPO right at the height of COVID in 2020. And it was a success story. We created more than 100 millionaires under the age of 30, largely in the northwest of England. And my journey there was a chief people officer, so we kind of, going from this like kind of 50-person startup to 5,000 people. And today, taking some of those principles, hiring for potential and developing skills and trying that sort of potential first model. And at Academy, we're trying to encourage all companies and industries to maybe lean into this. And our results have been pretty good in terms of kind of broadening access to great opportunity for people from kind of all kinds of backgrounds. So on the surface, that sort of experience and that journey was, it was a great British success story. Two pictures here of different prime ministers, each, David Cameron on the left, coming up to Warrington in the northwest to open a brand new warehouse where we were announcing 2,000 jobs in the local area. And then Boris Johnson chose to sort of, press the button on his election campaign, opening another warehouse that we'd put up. And this is kind of what they look like. Huge things, millions of square foot. You could fit hundreds of football pitches in them. And they were huge engines of local job creation to handle all this rapid growth. And it was just last week, actually. I've not been at the Hut Group for more than 5 years now. And I sort of catching up with colleagues. My memory of these warehouses as the sort of chief people person is, we're running up to Black Friday soon. It's the major online shopping season. And as we approached peak trading, we just couldn't fill the warehouse with workers. We would take something like 3 months of orders in a single weekend. And so we were running out of workers in the local area. So I was chartering planes from places in Eastern Europe like Romania to bring in people to do shifts for us, because we just couldn't get the local talent. In addition to that, we were shutting down the office and sending 1,000 head office people to do shifts in the warehouse. And catching up with colleagues just last week, today those same warehouses have hardly anyone in them, 5 years on. And they're entirely powered, almost entirely powered by AI and robotics. And basically, the economics of these labor shortages caused that to happen. And it happened, it's happened incredibly quick. Even I couldn't believe it, going to see these sort of automated warehouses. So, is this story coming soon to an office near all of us? I think is the central thing that has kind of been on my mind, reverberating around since last week. And after all, kind of here in Britain, and probably not unique to us, we're facing a perfect storm of economic pressures. Firstly, there's a sort of seismic shift happening in our labour market. Since COVID, we're now kind of almost 1 million workers fewer in the sort of working population. And at the same time, we've had kind of record low unemployment, substantially more vacancies than job seekers. Our working age population, so the number of adults who are in work today, is both rapidly shrinking, as we saw, and it's rapidly aging. And Brexit and COVID have sort of acted as accelerants to an already existing trend. Brexit means it's hard to import the workers, and COVID sort of a load of people took themselves out of the workforce. And this year, for the first time on record, more people sadly died in the UK than were born. So the underlying structure of our sort of demographics is not positive for the workforce. And this is sort of ticking time bomb. It's a glimpse at our demographic destiny, if you like. A shrinking workforce simply means lower tax revenues. At the same time, you have soaring costs from this aging population. And it's creating a big gap between the sort of taxes government can raise and the spending they committed to. And it's leading to sort of unsustainable debt levels. And we're heading into the budget, I think it's been much talked about, and we'll see where that lands. But sort of in the long term, this sort of path leads to an inevitable outcome. It's sort of rising taxes and big spending cuts. And kind of my fear is what happens next is quite predictable, because just like the warehouse story, we've kind of seen it before. When you have a shrinking labour market, it's quite competitive to hire. You might hear phrases like skill shortages, talent gaps, war for talent. And you simply have to pay workers more. At the same time, if the government is forced to raise taxes, it makes the cost of hiring humans a lot more expensive. When that happens, companies respond by making big, substantial investments in technology, as we saw in the case of the Hut Group making tens of millions of pounds of investment in automation because it couldn't hire the workers locally. But this time, of course, potentially it's white-collar work that is at risk. And so it kind of, obviously this conference, especially yesterday, has been talking about the technological advances of AI, and we can kind of see that by the day and week almost. And we have absolutely no doubt that those advances will continue, and the costs will continue to come down, the quality will go up. But our society couldn't be, our sort of business environment couldn't be any more ripe for this phenomenon as well if we look at those sort of demographics. And we're kind of already seeing this play out in front of our eyes. We're seeing organizations boast of their major investments in technology with this specific aim to reduce kind of headcount. We're seeing a category of entire occupations quickly disrupted, and but this is also combined with when these investments are being made in technology, there's a surge of demand for new skills, new modern, high-skilled workers. And it's a sort of interesting point where I think you kind of have to kind of almost rethink the underlying model of human potential, human development, and the sort of workforce. And the sort of idea that's been mulling over in my mind, and I believe the thing I've been working on over the last 10 or 15 years is this sort of concept I call the potential economy. AI isn't just going to change work, it's kind of entirely redefining human value almost. And on one hand, you have companies who are struggling to find the right skills to be competitive in this new world. People who can help them build, develop, run, deploy, integrate AI technologies. But whole swathes of workers are going to struggle for the opportunities they need to stay relevant. And there's some kind of key problems that are already rearing their head. Firstly, depending on the sort of insights and the source, up to 375 million workers globally are likely to need to switch occupation by the end of this decade. That means leave the job they have today and the thing they know how to do and find an entirely new thing they don't currently know how to do very soon. The problem for individuals is that most people, once they embark on a sort of career, have absolutely no idea what else they could be good at. And we need this sort of really large-scale reinvention of the workforce. At the same time, a growing number of companies are hustling and hiring like mad for brand new roles and brand new skills. But they're totally blind to the hidden potential already residing in their workforce today. And what this means is they're kind of often wasting billions and billions of pounds on redundancies that didn't need to happen and hires that didn't need to happen. And we see this because companies are reporting huge technology skills gap. Traditional hiring models, just like when I was back at the Hut Group, just can't keep up with this ferociously accelerating change. And there's a sort of hidden dynamic at play here around representation, in the sense that women and minorities of all kinds, ethnicities, and people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are sadly heavily overrepresented in the jobs that are most at risk of being disrupted, and they're severely underrepresented in the jobs that are newly emerging. And so it's kind of a big issue. But it is also a big opportunity, and I've kind of framed this as the great rehiring, a once in a generation. This, I guess, if you look at the underlying numbers, this sort of occupational transition, the need for tens and hundreds of millions of people to find new things to do very quickly, will be the biggest and fastest occupational shift in history. But this time it's kind of a little bit different. And it's my kind of thesis that just like when I was early on at the Hut Group trying to hire e-commerce skills, and they didn't exist, companies today who are trying to hire AI skills will find that there are not many people who have the skills they need out on the open market. They don't exist yet, or they're so new. And as a result, all of the traditional methods we have, and that society relies on to think about hiring and developing a workforce, are likely to be outdated. And this sort of core idea of the welcome to the potential economy. Historically, we've been in the credential economy or the knowledge economy. And this is all, if you're an organization hiring, you're basically, what have you done, where have you gone as a sort of decision point. Does this person have the right credentials and experience to do this job? We've been moving steadily away from that in the last decade or so. You might hear, skills first or the skills economy. And you're sort of answering the same question. You're asking someone to demonstrate they can do the job today, but you kind of, maybe if it's a technology job, you're like, we don't mind if you don't have a computer science degree, but prove you can pass the coding test. Might be an approach, for example. And so you're asking someone to demonstrate that they're skilled through alternative means, if you like. And what we've been heavily focused on for the last 15 years is something quite different, which is, could you see what someone could become? Could someone learn to do this new thing very quickly, and could they be really good at it? And when you sort of take that forward-looking approach, it's a total paradigm shift, because it reveals an entirely new, not just pool of talent, oceans of talent. And my kind of thesis is this is what is going to need to happen across the entire kind of economy. And what's interesting is if you kind of think it through a little bit more, if we're going to have this sort of large-scale automation of white-collar work, a lot of the jobs that are process-driven, routine, can be kind of repeatable, are likely clearly to be done better by AI over time. That's going to sort of default back. People who are going to be highly desirable will have uniquely human skills of creativity and collaboration and all of those wonderful things. And the good news about this is that those sorts of qualities reside in the entire population at large, not just with people who have credentials. And so this could be a great leveler. So that's sort of some of the context and some of the sort of theory. And now I wanted to kind of switch into some of the practical things that we're doing and have been doing to try and generate this sort of change. AI is reshaping work. And at Academy, we've decided we ought to try and reshape the workers for this new world. Our vision is to see the future AI-ready workforce that others can't. And we designed the system that is about discovering hidden potential, developing AI-ready skills very rapidly, and deploying those new skills to great success in brand new roles. And by discovering hidden potential, we're kind of looking at two key sources of talent, if you like. What I call the emerging workforce. So these are people who are seeking to enter the labor market, whether you're a graduate or a young person, or maybe you're a return-to-work mum, but you're coming back into the workforce. But of course, as we touched on, there's this extraordinarily large population who are already working today. They've left the education system. I think if we look at everyone who gets produced in a year out of schools, colleges, sixth forms, universities, and all further education, it's about 1.5% of the total workforce. It'll take an awful lot of time to rewire an entire economy if you only look at those people. So the other 98.5% of people, the existing workforce today who've left the education system, huge numbers are going to completely need to reinvent themselves. And so we're what we're doing is sort of helping those people identify their hidden potential and rewire them into the brand new pathways that have been created in the next economy. And to give you some sort of concrete examples of what we mean by sort of AI workforce, we increasingly see, I guess, 4 key capabilities that modern companies need. And here I'm thinking in particular some of the larger companies in our economy, 4 key capabilities that they need to sort of succeed in this new world. The ability to sort of integrate new AI systems very effectively alongside all of their existing business processes. The ability to govern AI, so this is the ethics and the compliance and the sort of some of the societal conversations we're about to have. Of course, some companies are and will be concerned about building innovative AI systems. This is probably for some of you in this room who are embarking on that sort of quest. And then delivering value from AI systems, getting this to work. The good news is the vast majority of new roles that we see being created are non-technical, i.e. ordinary people who haven't studied computer science, if you like, have a shot at being relevant and useful, very useful in this new world. And they have all of the right sort of attributes to succeed. But at the moment, it's a mystery to both themselves and probably the business that they're in. And you might imagine this in kind of three buckets of things that could happen. You've got, as we've discovered at our work at Academy, you've got people who are kind of non-technical today. They're not in a technical occupation, but they have very high potential to transition into a technical or a more technical occupation. Then you have this huge need to sort of upgrade legacy technologies. I've not very eloquently called this teaching old dogs powerful new tricks, but the idea here is, converting or upgrading people who've worked in technology for a long time to become completely AI native in their thinking and approach. But of course, the majority of what needs to be done is getting this to is getting the majority of our leaders and our talent in a company to even understand what AI is, what the potential applications could be, and how it could create business value. And most companies are really, really, really early on in this. So that's sort of some of the kind of background that we've been doing. And I think the UK kind of faces an existential choice about AI and work, and maybe we've been asking the wrong question. The question isn't really how do we stop AI taking jobs. I think that's inevitable, and it's almost a necessity. As we saw from the economic pressures, it's actually a necessity. It's almost a moral obligation to invest in the technology. And the question we're kind of trying to answer is, how do you use AI to unlock human potential before economic pressures kind of kill us with this widespread automation? Can we do the development before the disruption, I think? And I'm pretty urgent on this. We might have a handful of years before it's sort of the genie's out the bottle. In the story of the warehouse automation, economic pressures forced that, but the company was also forced to commit huge capex, tens of millions of pounds. Potentially deploying these sorts of modern AI systems arguably won't require the same level of capex. It might be more like software, but there might be other hurdles, regulatory hurdles, and other reasons that things don't happen quite as fast as they could do. But we might only have 2 or 3 years. And I think we ought to use those years incredibly wisely to start this mass reinvention of the workforce. There's sort of, the next 2 or 3 years might determine what path we take. AI replacing humans because we just waited too long to develop our people, or AI revealing the hidden human potential that we have, before the economic pressures lead to widespread automation. So my story really isn't one of dystopian fear. It's pragmatic. We're heading this direction, both from the technology, but also from the economic pressures. We're in the midst of the biggest, or in the early stages, of what will be the biggest disruption to human work since the Industrial Revolution. And it's time for an entirely new approach, and that's what we're trying to do at Academy. Thank you.
That was a tremendous talk and a powerful call to action with a lot of pragmatic strategy. So I encourage all of you who are interested in learning and hearing more to talk to Ash after and get involved with Academy. We have time for one question, and then we'll have to move on. So yeah, I see one there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this interesting talk. I don't have a question, but maybe more like a remark or
Sure.
just my thoughts about all of this. I've been thinking about this a lot myself recently, and we need to go back to basics, to where all of this starts. So it comes from the privilege, and everyone is praising, for example, like PhDs from Oxford and Harvard and the other university, but nobody's talking about how to actually enter the PhD program, and even more to finish it. You need to be very, very privileged. So most of the leaders today are coming from all of these universities, and they're entering these companies like leading DeepMind, Google, Microsoft, any other company. And they spend most of their lives in these in their privileged bubbles and talking to their privileged friends. And that's what they know, right? They don't need to think maybe more than 2% of all other things that a highly unprivileged population needs to think about. And these people, they are developing these very important large language models or bringing important decisions based on their privileged experience. And yeah, I would love to see more leaders of these universities coming together, like Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, together with the leaders of the companies like Google, DeepMind, and others, and sit together and publicly discuss about these topics and trying to figure out how to solve that, actually, how to do something about it. That would be the panel I would travel many, many miles to listen to.
Yeah, look, I think you're absolutely right. And whilst I can't comment directly on I can sort of agree with where you're coming from. My perspective is as an employer and the workforce, and I think both at the Hut Group and now, what we realize is that is actually employers who suffer from the problem of shortages of workers and are in a great position to do something about it. So at the Hut Group, we set up our own training. We turned our technologists into teachers, turned our chief technology officer and a bunch of our people, because we couldn't get representative talent like you're talking about from the universities. So we made it ourselves. We created it ourselves. And we're trying to encourage a lot of employers to do that. And that removes economic barriers to people because they're fully funded. You can come from any background and you can retrain, reskill, or learn new skills. And our results in doing that have been extraordinary. 60% of people have been female going into technology, 60% from minority ethnic backgrounds, almost 50% from low-income backgrounds, just like mine when I was at school. So by opening a door in someone's lives, we're really urging employers to step up here and do this. And it won't address the comments you're making about the sort of elite of academia, but maybe it'll do something for society.
Thank Ash again for a wonderful presentation.